Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Angel Face Magic Hour. I'm really excited. We're with another guest. Today, we're with Ashlyn Martin. How are you doing today? I'm
Hello.
excited.
I know I'm so excited too. I got all the butterflies, all the feels. I'm super excited. I'm glad I'm here.
Ashlyn is a psychic medium. I don't know what you would describe yourself as, a medium.
Psychic medium. Yeah. I started off relating more to spiritual medium just because of deconstructing all my beliefs around it. But now I just keep it simple. I'm like psychic medium.
I feel like it can be a loaded word, the word psychic,
Mhm.
even and medium, but I feel like psychic is people have such a idea in their mind of what that means. So some people don't like it,
Yeah.
but I think it's good to get comfortable with those things. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm just gonna have you briefly introduce yourself, where you're located, and yeah, a little bit about your services and how people can find you.
Okay, I am located in Pensacola, Florida, and I am a licensed minister in the state of Florida, and I'm also a Reiki practitioner, and I'm also a mom of three kids, and I practice conscious parenting, and that has really helped a lot with my spiritual awakening and with my just journey as a spirit, becoming more and more aware. I relate a lot every single day to my kids because they're, right there with me. So yeah, that's where I'm located right now is the Gulf of Mexico, Pensacola.
Amazing. And so do you do readings like in person, or I know that you do like some different fairs and stuff like that too. So I want to hear about that. But can people find you like can people see you online, or is it all in person?
Yes, I do both. I do in-person markets and stuff in my community. And I also have a virtual platform where I post a lot on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. And I'm always putting courses and offerings out there. And I also do, Spirit's telling me to bring this up. I do love donations once a month. I do a donation based reading. I usually have at least one or two people reach out to me every couple weeks that are struggling, and I work them in and do donation wise visits for people.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think that's important. With the fairs, I'm so curious about that. Like, do you have a kind of like protocol to keep yourself kind of grounded when there's so many different people coming in and out around you as you're doing the reading?
I kind of just threw myself out there doing it, and I've learned as I go. But for the most part, of course, like when someone sits down with me, I say a prayer and call in only the best, the highest news from source, and then I set a timer, and I kind of just I'm able to tune out what's around me very easily because that was the very first event that I ever did was at this huge psychic fair where there was like 30 30 other mediums and psychics there and like so many people. So I really just had to I just got thrown in there, and yeah, I've just been learning as I go, but I definitely ground a lot and I bring crystals with me, and sometimes people are drawn to hold crystals as well. And another thing, when I'm out at the event, like say there's a distraction behind us, like a baby's crying, or if dogs start barking, sometimes my discernment will tell me to, like, what is that about? Is there, and sometimes it'll actually link into the reading. So that sometimes kind of works out in spirit's favor, I'd say.
I totally agree. I feel like sometimes if I'm doing a reading, like a big truck drives by, it's just like a confirmation or might like mean something
Yeah.
specific. Which I think took me a little while to not be like annoyed about that, and not get distracted myself. But I've never done, I've done group readings, but I've never done it in like a fair or anything like that. I am interested, but also kind of nervous to do something like that because there's just it's so unknown to who is coming through. Do you feel like there's like a theme sometimes, like if you're doing a fair and like there's like 3 readings or something and they're similar, or does that happen to you?
Yeah, it does. So I've been doing the markets and stuff in around town for almost 2 years. So the theme for me, and especially like coming out as a medium too, to like people that have known me since high school that still like are on my page, and people that I still talk to every now and then, it has been, everybody's always like interested. And so I've been able to figure out, I resonate a lot with generational mediumship. So usually it's if the person has lost their mom or their dad, grandfather, grandmother, children, like it's usually really close in the generational line. Every now and then I get a person that has, and of course, husbands and wives as well. But every now and then I'll get a really young person that has lost a friend or something like that. But for the most part, it's grandparents and great grandparents that are coming through in the readings. It's usually pretty close in the generational line.
That's interesting. Yeah. So how would you describe, so many people have like a different definition of mediumship. Like how would you define that for yourself?
For me, it happened so organically and just so on the spectrum of it just helped my mental health so much to be able to like slow down and be present with myself and realize that these messages and these things that I've been hearing for so long, I can slow them down and use them to my own benefit. And I had to really learn how to control, or I don't want to say control because you can't control what comes through, but you can put up boundaries around, like if you feel a really negative energy or a really anxious energy, you can put up boundaries and push that away and not interact with it.
Yeah. Do you feel like that would be like your primary way they communicate with you? Is it mostly through like hearing messages?
It's a little bit of a lot of things. I hear, and it's so clear when I hear it, and then it'll also usually I'll hear and I'll also have a visual, like I'll see a silhouette, or I can usually tell right away, like hi, there's a female here, like there's a woman here and she's tapping you on the shoulder and referencing overalls. What does this mean? Does this mean anything? And it's taken me a while to have those type of boundaries and ways of asking for the evidence from spirit, but it's also just been more so about trusting what I hear and see and being able to transfer that to my sitter.
Yeah. I think like it's just interesting for me, but also for people listening to hear about like how you experience it. So
And
I don't
sometimes
know
I'll
if
get
you
a
want to like
feeling
break it down.
too.
Like I'm curious, like, is there any like physical component to that?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, there are physical components. Like sometimes I'll feel like I got the wind knocked out of me, or I'll even randomly, if I'm not even sitting with someone, if I get like a really bad headache, or if I get really nauseous, or if anything happens, I always scan my energy field and like scan around me. And I say specifically, I don't need to feel your feelings and what you're going through to understand this story and what you're trying to tell me. And it might not always be spirit. It could be a lot of other things, but the first thing that I do, if I'm aware of it, which, 9 times out of 10, I am aware and able to, call back my own sovereignty if I'm feeling something like from spirit, that could be from spirit, like if I'm feeling a headache or a pound in the chest or something like that. But sometimes they've been really intense, and I'm already a high functioning, like anxious person with racing thoughts and with like all the above. So sometimes that can be really scary, but it's also very empowering when it goes away and you're left with something other than like that. Okay, that was, I'm not crazy. That was a message, or that was something outside of me causing that reaction in my body. Because I notice too now that if I go around certain people, I get sick. I might not stay sick the whole time, but it disrupts my spirit when I go around certain people. And that's not to say that they're bad or good or anything, but it's just me really in the last couple years becoming really aware of my solar plexus and really aware of when I'm not grounded versus when I am grounded.
Yeah, and like sensations.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna ask you. I feel like sometimes it's like a message, like for example, someone had an injury or whatever when they were once alive, and you're like feeling that like pain, like almost as a evidence, like from the grandfather that died, he had like a bad knee or something, and you're like, oh, my knee hurts.
Yeah.
Like that happens to me. But then it's also sometimes it's more of a empathic, like psychic experience. Like you might be feeling the person that you're reading, or just like around you, their energy, which I think is really difficult to start to understand the difference between those things.
Yeah. It's really neat how they communicate. And I had a really good spiritual development coach that really just pulled it out of me and stuck it like in me to just follow your intuition, and that, you're never wrong. Whatever you're perceiving is not wrong. You just have to figure out how to relay it for
Or
your
understand
kid.
it, interpret it.
Right.
Yeah.
But you're not wrong that you're seeing a dog running through a field, but what else could you link that to potentially? Like, I was at an event for New Year's and it was so busy, so many people, and this sweet lady came and sat down. And as soon as she sat down, I was just like, wow, I really want a cough drop right now. Like, why do I? And I was like, like clearing my throat. I'm like, why do I feel like I need a cough drop? And she's like, oh my God, I think that's my husband. So and so, he always carried a cough drop around. And then I started bringing up more of what he was showing me. And he was just showing me like a candy dish in the house. And it's just so cool to, because I'm always blown away. Like I'm still blown away at the things that I see and hear and are able to, just by simply being willing to, feel my feelings. That's why it's so important for grounding and meditation and being aware of your own energy when you're a medium or a spiritual worker, because you can feel when it's not your own energy, and you can be like, oh, that feels masculine, that feels feminine, what is that? So
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's crazy. So you worked with Sloan.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, she's amazing. Sloan Tate, everyone. But yeah, I think it's really important for people to have like some kind of physical practice to help like cleanse their energy, like a grounding thing, because if you're gonna go into doing readings, like I think it's vital that we have to have that like clear energy, whatever that means for you, so that you can interpret, the information that comes through. When
Yeah.
did you first find out you're a medium? Like, when did you first realize that?
Well, growing up, I always had a feeling. I didn't know how to put it into words at all, but I was a very visual kid. Like I can remember driving down the interstate with my parents being young, like 5 and 6 years old, and I would straight up just visualize myself or like a dog running outside, like running as fast as I am, jumping, doing things. And like I did that for hours, just all of that. So I know, or I assume, knowing what I know now, I was being visited by spirit then too. But for me, I went through a like 4.5 year pain pill turn to injecting heroin addiction. And that was a big eye opener for me, recovering from that and figuring out who I was and why was I trying to kill myself every day, basically. Why was I doing that? And that's still uncomfortable today. I have my own podcast, and that's what I'm diving into is why was why was I doing that? Because now looking back, it just seems so evident how much pain I was in. But then I had no idea how to put that into words. But I'd say how I knew that I was a medium, or what really got me being a lot more spiritual, was when my great grandmother passed away. She passed away January 1st, 2020. And times were already like energetically feeling different for everybody, because 3 months after that was when the world stopped and everybody had to stay inside and everything. So I remember being at her funeral, and just because I brought my kids there because that's their great grandmother. And when you're she lived to be like 90 something years old. So she didn't have a lot of people that like her age. So it was all a bunch of younger people. And I remember specifically, like I could feel one of my distant relatives like judging me for having my kids there because they were just being kids. And I remember thinking to myself, like, no, Granny would have wanted them here. This is a part of life. I'm not, because they had kids that they didn't bring. And I'm just like, I understand kind of both, but why is death and dying so taboo that you feel like you have to leave your like 4th, 5th grade kid at home? Why can't they come be a part of that grieving? I just feel.
And when they're older, I feel like they'll want to have had that experience.
Maybe, yeah. I just thought, okay, so back to the funeral, I could just feel this judgment of having my kids there because they didn't have their kids there. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And since then that person like doesn't even talk to anybody in the family or anything. So it's death makes people act funny. Like if they were playing the game, like playing along, not seeing their grandparents all the time, because this is my great grandparents, but this would have been this person's grandparent. Like if they hadn't seen them in 20 years, and then that's just kind of how they are. Some people
Yeah.
aren't. I'm super sentimental. Like my grandparents were like the only state of consistency that I had. My parents got divorced when I was really young. So my grandparents like always being there, just drive 4 hours to Alabama and they're always there. that is still a big foundation for my mediumship, because my grandmother actually came to me one of the first times that she came to me, because I was struggling with coming out as a medium, because I do believe in Jesus Christ, Yeshua, however the energy finds you. So it's been really hard for me to deconstruct the biblical beliefs that made me feel the Holy Spirit. But so my great grandmother, a couple months after she passed away, she came to me, and I was in this like cycle in my head going back and forth. And I heard her so clearly, and I felt her. And she's like, Ashlyn, if you can come out as a recovering heroin addict to everyone, you can
Appreciate you.
come out as a medium. Like, think about how good this
Oh,
feels. And I just was like, oh, like I felt relieved,
oh,
like,
that makes me feel good.
yeah, I'm living her, yeah, just the amount of freedom that I get to experience now, previous to women in my generational line a couple generations ago, like it's liberating being able to be like, I don't know, like, is she a witch? Like, what is she, getting, really being able to stand in your power. And I think that's why I went through my drug addiction too, because I didn't know how to handle my power. And when I say my power, I'm not saying I'm more powerful than anyone. I'm saying like our soul power that we all have inside of us. Every single one of us has a beautiful sparkle of God in them.
Yeah, and I think
I
like
believe that.
anyone can connect with that or develop that like in their own way. I don't think everyone necessarily has to do it through mediumship, but if they want to, they could too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think a lot of people in generations before might have had these similar gifts. I know at least in my family line, there's a lot of like mentally ill people that I feel like probably had those connections to spirit, but it wasn't acceptable or understood even through them. And then of course, religion. My family is very Catholic. So, but there is such a deep mysticism within Catholicism and Christianity, and like just the idea of connecting to the Holy Spirit, I think is really similar to what we do, but it's just, I don't think people not everyone is open to understanding it that way. So Ashlyn has her own podcast, Get Curious. You just started it. And I listened to your latest episode and you were talking a little bit about your kind of experience deepening your understanding of like kind of the feminine connection in the Bible and some things that maybe were misinterpreted. So I'm just curious, like, do you feel like you have a guidance from any kind of like feminine energy through that? Like, I know you were talking a little bit about Mary Magdalene. I'm curious
Yeah.
about your experience.
I'm so glad you brought her up. Yeah. So my experience, yeah, absolutely. And Mother Mary too, but more so Mary Magdalene. When I was incarcerated like 6 years ago, when I was in jail, and I talk about a lot of that on my podcast, my heroin addiction, like they say, it's jails, institutions, or death. So I'm just very grateful that I've been able to
You're
recover.
alive.
Yeah, exactly. But I remember, this is why mediumship is so dear to me, because it did happen so organically. And I was at such a rock bottom, gambling with my soul and my life every day. So when I was in jail and I felt the Holy Spirit, I felt it. I knew that that was something different, something I had never felt in church, something that, yeah, you feel it around your family members, of course. It's just like on fire whenever you allow yourself to really feel the energy of source in that way. And especially when you're going through hard times. So specifically, I remember already being comfortable with God, energy, Jesus, because I was in my Bible pretty much every day, reading, journaling, being in the Word. So I felt God and I felt Jesus, and it felt masculine. I didn't know that at the time, but now looking back, I can say, oh, that was masculine. And what happened to me when I was sitting in, because we were allowed to go to classes while we were in the jail. So when I went to one of the classes and I was in a smaller setting, smaller room, I remember like, okay, I got God with me. I feel so good. And then I felt another presence come in and I was just like, holy shit, what is this? Who are you? But I didn't even know that like I could ask questions. But
Yeah.
looking back, I know that was Mary Magdalene just coming in and showing me like basically the yin and the yang is how I perceive it. Because after all the things that I've been through in my life, I have been pushed over into my masculine energy a lot more. So being able to feel that, I was just like, oh wow, that is very, very divine. That's different.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like I have I don't know, I've just always had a very deep connection with Mother Mary. I was not raised religious, but my parents were. So, you know, my grandma is super Catholic and Mary's a big deal for them. But I just always like had just such a connection to her. And throughout like different times of my life, I've had just weird kind of like signs where just moving into my new apartment, like there'd be like a statue of her and I'll just see her like in different significant points in my life. But Mary Magdalene has really interesting story. So I think it's even if people don't have any interest in religion or were raised in a different religion, I think the stories can be very enlightening and like empowering. And can provide like healing to kind of understand there are so many, I think so many aspects that have been erased.
Yeah. What I'm hearing right now is Jesus learned it from somebody. He didn't just become a 30-year-old, because there's a lot of time that is unaccounted for of his life. And he didn't just become enlightened by doing nothing. There's a lot of different things you can research, but my belief is that I think he went to Egypt and learned, like he was
A
a
lot
part
of a lot of people say
some of
that
the
in like
mystery
different
schools. Yeah, there were mystery schools
history.
over there. Yeah, and like just mystics. That was probably what they were referred to. But yeah, a lot of stuff has been taken away, and that's like the Bible was my starting ground. And now that I have deconstructed a lot of beliefs that I used to believe, I'm like, wow, that's very fearful. Those are very controlling. I don't resonate with that. It doesn't feel good with my spirit. So when you think about the fruits of the spirit that the Bible talks about, which is like joy, peace, love, good things, that's what you should be feeling when you're working with any healer or spiritual person. Like obviously we have egos that come up, so you might have some shit come up, some bad feelings, but as long as you can discern those back away and feel the love still, then that's what we're going for. Like we're not going to ever, at least my belief is we're not going to ever be 100% healed. We're going to always be keeping on the journey of healing, you know?
Yeah, I don't think it's like a I don't even know what the right word is for it, but like it's not an experience that has an end. It's continuous. Yeah, that's so interesting. I like was listening. It was like a YouTube. I don't know why this is coming up, but it feels important. But I was like a YouTube ad that was like in between a podcast I was listening to, and they're talking about people's experience like with their parents and like kids. If kids feel like this fear around their mom or their dad, like they're not going to be comfortable sharing with you. And I feel like it's the same kind of idea with that higher spiritual family, parent, God, whatever you want to call it. Like if there's this fear of that, there's no way we can feel comfortable enough to really receive and experience that mutual connection. And I feel like for me, the word God in itself too, it took a lot of healing to feel even like comfortable with that, of it not being like something better than me, like that it is me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I absolutely know what you mean. And you just talked about kids and how they pick up on certain vibes around their parents. And that's something that I learned. There's a book called Conscious Parenting. I recommend it to anybody who is, even if you're not a parent and you're just around kids, or if you're going through inner healing, inner child healing, inner girl healing. This book by Dr. Shafali is so incredible. She explains how consciously we have to look at our children and they are mirroring everything back to us. So if your kid is slamming doors and throwing fits and leaving their clothes all around, you're doing it too. And the beautiful thing about parenting is you can either show up and do it consciously, or you're going to have those patterns run through your family, and you're going to not live as fulfilled as if you realized, like, my biggest thing for me is I used to, like, I realized with yelling, I used to be a big yeller at my kids, yelling at them to do something. And then I'm like, well, wait a minute, I don't do good when people yell at me. And also my kids started yelling back, and I'm like, you can't yell. Stop yelling and yell it to someone. That's like being the biggest hypocrite ever. And I remember as a kid always being told, like, don't back talk, stop back talking. And I've realized now, like, I have to let my 12-year-old, almost 13-year-old daughter back. I have to let her experiment a little bit with who she is. And every time she slams a door, am I always going to rush in there and be like, why did you do that? No, because I'm learning that people can become addicted to that chaos. So I'm in print. If I chase her essentially after, Mom, can I do this? No, you can't. We're not doing anything like that tonight. Oh, you're the worst mom ever. And she runs to her room and shuts the door. Does she really mean that? No, she wants connection and closeness, and she wants to be seen that she's not getting her way right now, instead of me marching in there and being like, how dare you do that? And what does she learn from that? Like, I didn't learn anything from that, but the Conscious Parenting book talks about the emotional imprinting that our parents leave on us is kind of like an energetic filter that is in one household. So the energetic filter of the way the dynamics were spiritually, emotionally, physically, like that's how the generational trauma passes down, is through those emotional filters and imprints. Because if you notice, I'm guilty of it too, but like everybody has that point or that subject that they're like, oh, I can't talk about this right now. Like they're like literally like, I can't do it. Don't push me. A lot of people feel that way, and like generations before us weren't allowed to express themselves. That was the generation of kids are to be seen and not heard, and so I guess that's why I resonate with being a generational medium, is because having my daughter grow up and watching her mirror everything back to me has been just so spiritual. And me being able to picture myself at 12 years old and like, what did I really need from my mom and my dad? And so I try to give my children just a safe place to express themselves, because they're not always gonna, like, they're gonna whine and they're gonna do all those things that are oh so triggering, but they're just living, they're just expressing themselves. And the more you try to suppress it, like, stop crying, I told you, stop crying. What why is that okay? Like, once I realized a couple years ago I was saying that and people around me were saying that, I've had to nicely like tell people, like, please don't tell them to stop crying. Like, please don't do that, or please don't say that to them. And it's really uncomfortable, but it's like, that's my job, to advocate for them.
I think that's so important, because those are the things that, yeah, like they show up later in life. It makes it more difficult to experience
Yeah.
asking for this or that, or experience your emotions because of the way you were talked to. And like so many people talk about like our subconscious imprinting, and to take it like into generational, it's kind of crazy because it goes back so far. So even things that were like uncomfortable discussing, like you said, like maybe we just weren't allowed to talk about that at all. So it makes it like almost like a avoidant thing.
Yeah. And you don't want to suppress those emotions like that. Like, it's easier said than done, but especially over a long period of time, suppressing your emotions can turn to, your body reacting to the emotional, because your body's not being able to run. Your body's a machine and it's not being able to run the right way because you're blocking, like you're having blocks come up. And you just mentioned about the subconscious programming, and I think we talked about this in our last session that I had with you too. I think it's you can't. I don't know what I hear when I'm in the
Oh,
moment, or like on the hamster
I
wheel.
have it somewhere in my notes, but I can't remember.
I hear like, no, you can't, or something along those lines, but it's exactly what a parent would say, like, no, you can't. And that's not saying my parents are bad or anything. It's just what it is. Like, I have clients come to me that are moms and they're like, oh, I've done this, this, and this. How can I never hurt them again? How can I never do this again? And I have to tell them, it's not about you never doing it again. It's about you being willing to show up vulnerable and open and being like, I am so sorry that I acted like that.
Like the
I'm
fact that
so
they're even
sorry.
concerned about it is
Right.
is
Yeah.
important.
None of us are getting out without any kind of generational trauma. Like, everybody's going to have it. Even the kid that has all the resources, and the kid that has both parents and has everything going for them, they're still going to have some sort of generational trauma. So that kind of makes me feel a little bit better knowing that, like, even the parents that have it all figured out, because all three of my children were unplanned. I became a mom very young. I was 18 years old when I had my oldest daughter. So yeah, there's a lot that goes with parenting, and
you're like growing up together.
yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if this is like too personal, so if it is, but is there addiction in your family? Like, do other people have addictions?
Yeah, absolutely. And this goes back to looking at the generations in my family. So the generations before me, their addictions were not like, they weren't sticking a needle in their arm and living on the street. So it was more acceptable, I guess. There's that word, like, high functioning addict, like someone can be a functional addict.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. There is. And I do worry about that, like, with my children. So that's why I'm also open about my struggles and what I've been through, because I remember being a kid, you want to know. And if you don't know the full story, you put together pieces in your head anyways as a kid. And so I'd rather my children have a clear idea, because obviously I don't tell them everything, but I tell them enough.
Yeah. Of course
And
not their kids, but
I answer their questions because I just know that it's going to do more good than damage. Like, I think the damage would be, me not talking about it and not sharing about it, because I actually have a TikTok that I made that says I will never stop speaking out about addiction, because there's an entire generation of parents, or there's an entire generation of children that are losing their parents. Addiction is touching everyone. So yeah, it's a really uncomfortable thing to talk about. Even though it's years behind me, it's still really uncomfortable, but it also fires me up and makes me just want to speak for those that can't speak anymore.
yeah, and I think it's so important to see like that it's possible, to not be using for the rest of your life. Like when you're in an active state like that, it's really hard to imagine a future. So I think it's important for you to do that. So I'm proud of you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, and if you guys want to know more details about your story with drugs and your experience going to jail, you can hear it on the podcast. And I'm sure you're going to go into kind of a lot more about kind of the recovery process and your experience with mediumship. So everyone should subscribe. I'll put the links in the show notes. But yeah, I'm just gonna look and see if there's any questions I had some things I was curious about. One thing that I'm curious, because I know you mentioned this on your podcast, that you had like a connection with the numbers 333 and 3. Like, I'm curious if there's any signs or symbols when your grandmother or other spirits come to you. Like, do you have any specific signs that show you they're near you?
Yeah, usually it's different every time. And when it's a loved one, I can usually tell, like, very fast who it is, what they're trying to say, because they're usually just trying to say they love you and they support you. I'm here, validate that I'm here. I'm here. They come through on the radio a lot for me too. And seeing the numbers on my phone, like, I see them all the time. like the 555, 333, all of them.
I saw
And
the 444 like it was a second ago when we were recording.
yeah, and people can say what they want about angel numbers, because even sometimes when I see them, I am like, oh, boo-hoo, or great, another angel number. But then there's also another feeling like counteracting with that, like, no, it's good, Ashlyn, it's good. So I think the message can be different every time, even if it's the same thing, even if like you make a promise with your dying loved one that they're going to come around as a red bird, as a cardinal, you could still have different messages. It could come on a t-shirt, or it could come on like a bumper sticker, or even if it's a red bird, try not to get too specific with the symbols. It's more so what you feel or at least for me, it's like what you feel along with seeing the sign.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, because there's so many, there's like 35 blogs that are like, what does this 444 mean? And like, you might get understanding out of that. Like, it might be relevant for you, but it's probably more like what you're saying. Like, when you see that on the clock or like on the symbol, like, what are you experiencing in that moment?
Yeah.
And like, what are you thinking about too? I feel like it's often for me, like when I see them, it's often like a confirmation, like of just something I was thinking about, or almost that I'm in the vibration, like I'm in having a good experience in that moment. And that's when I'll see the signs. And I feel like it's almost like encouragement to keep having like that joyous feeling, or like just having more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And about mediumship too, I know that a lot of mediums work differently. I would encourage people to ask, if you're about to work with a medium, ask them, what are your beliefs? They don't have to have the same beliefs as you. Just make sure that they sound and that your gut is telling you that they are a heart-centered, open person, because that's the type of medium that you want to connect with and open up with, is someone who is very heart-centered. Because I know in my practice, I don't control what comes through. I have sitters sometimes that will sit down, and before I can even tell them, this is a blind reading, I'm just going to tell you my impressions that I'm seeing and feeling around you. They're like, oh, my husband died, and they start crying. And okay, so I see that this is going to be a more of like a grief consoling session. Like, she knows her husband's there. She just needs a little bit of help getting out of that vibration of grief, because if you're sucked into this huge tragedy and you're not feeling joy and love and abundance, and you're not feeling those feelings authentically, you might forget that they exist, and you might start resonating more with the grief and sorrow, and that's okay. But yeah, what I was going to say is I can't control what comes through necessarily. I had a lady sit down at a market one time, and she sat down, and I was like, your sister. I was like, I feel like your sister has passed away, has she? And she's like, yeah, she's passed away, but I don't want to talk to her. And I'm like, well, she's wanting to talk to you. She's acknowledging you guys being in the kitchen, doing dishes and like roughhousing. And I was like, I feel like she's trying to say sorry. Would that be something? Oh, nope. That lady did not want any part of it. And that is when you have to like pivot and kind of be like, explain, well, she's coming through, what else? Because it kind of puts a block on the rest of the reading for me. This doesn't happen all the time. And the lady was really nice. She just wasn't she wasn't really there to heal. She was just there to hear from someone else. I don't even remember who she wanted to hear from. But I can't look at that like I failed. I can't look at that like I didn't, just because she might have been upset that she didn't hear what she wanted to hear. Spirit is on the other line, ecstatic, because
Yeah,
the
sometimes it's not
message
exactly what
landed.
you
Yeah.
want, but it's what you need to hear, which I think can be really hard. And I think sometimes people uh just want like confirmation that they're like doing the right thing, but I don't necessarily feel like that it comes always through a mediumship reading. Do you
Yeah.
feel like different, like sometimes people just can't, like they might think that they need a reading, but they just need healing?
Um, no, I haven't had anyone. Well, yes, I take that back. I've had a few instances where people will pay me and they'll get on the call and they're like, okay, his name is Robbie Bennett. What is he doing right now? And I'm like, oh, I don't work that way. I don't understand. So the session ends up turning, this has happened a few times. All regarding relationships. Like the women just want me to
Like psychically spy on them? Oh my
yeah.
God, that's so funny, but also
So
it's kind of sad.
immediately I use this as a way for me to be like, listen, you need to go take a shower, light some candles, put some mantras on about self-love. You need to throw away all his stuff. Like, do they listen? I have no idea. But I give them, when I get people that come with those type of readings, I still try to show up authentically instead of just like blowing it off. Because I still think there's something to learn, because maybe years ago I would have went to a medium and asked those surface level questions, because I'm just not a surface level spiritual worker. I want to get in there to the shadow work and to all the deep wounds. I want to talk about those.
Yeah, I think sometimes people, it's almost like a party trick kind of thing that they're expecting, and then you're like actually legit and tell them all this intense stuff, and they're like, oh wait, I don't know if I was ready for that. But I truly believe that spirit aligns us like with our clients, like even if it was like not a good experience per se, I think it teaches you or them like something. So I think there's a reason that they might come in.
Yeah, I agree. I agree so much. And it's just really about putting yourself out there and gaining confidence as doing it at markets and gaining confidence. And because now when I do that, I know that when I'm in settings like this, one-on-one, I can totally trust my gut, because it has been right. And I'm not always right. Obviously, there's things that I don't get, the sitter doesn't get the evidence all the way sometimes, but there's still learning to be done from that.
Yeah, and I feel like it's how I see it, it's also almost like a transmission of energy. Like if we're gonna sit down in a reading, like we're gonna have this conversation, but there's also spirit is coming through and like I am helping you connect to that energy. So they might just have some kind of healing experience, even if it's not necessarily like an energy healing, like a Reiki session or something. I feel like it's transformative, even if they don't fully understand why.
Yeah. Yeah, Reiki has been very transformative for me. That's something that when I heard what it was a couple years ago, it was just one of those things where it was I heard about it. I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. That sounds like exactly what I need to be doing. And In 2020, I was working in the housekeeping department at a condo on the beach here. And it was a really nice job. I loved it. Like I just was able to listen to podcasts all day. And I was the laundry room attendant. And I loved it. And then there was a big hurricane that happened. And we just didn't have to go to work for like a couple weeks because the power was out and things were really, really damaged. And spirit was like nudging me and pushing me to quit that job because there were a lot of, I don't necessarily want to say abuse, but there was like abuse of power going on with the people above me, like just the way he would treat the staff. And I was discerning that and like feeling like this is not right. This is not cool. I don't feel safe here. So that was another big thing of me just like trusting spirit, and spirit has provided since then. And I'm so grateful for just being able to show up. And this isn't my quote directly. I did hear this from a lady, that Suzanne Geisman. She's a medium on YouTube and stuff, but one of her coaches told her, someone that went to like Arthur Finley Mediumship College, one of her prayers, she says, is just let me always be in awe. Let me always be like, oh my God, I can't believe, how did I know that name? How did I know John? How did I know it was Mark? Like, how did I know all of this? Just being blown away. And that's one thing that I really do cherish, because in my readings, I am being like 100% genuine with the messages and the love. And I love that my clients can feel that.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Do you feel like the spirits will come like do you feel like they come into your space like when you're doing it on Zoom, or do you feel like it's almost like you're going to them?
They come to me. I think I probably go to them in some ways. But for the most, like they come to me for sure, I think.
Do you feel like when you do a Reiki session or like a healing session, do you feel like there's different energies that come forward, like different guides than when you do your readings?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that. That's a great question. Yeah, because when I'm around someone and I'm feeling their loved one or their husband, their children, and if we're doing the reading and I feel like the Holy Spirit or God come in, or one of the archangels, this doesn't happen too much, but I can feel it because it is an even higher energy and feeling than me being the medium portraying that. Because even like the word medium, I'm not going all the way up to the level that spirit is at. I'm just helping the sitter feel through that grief, because if they're in that grief that we just talked about and forgot what joy and love feels like, then they might miss those moments with their spiritual loved one. They might miss those because they haven't felt that in a while.
Yeah, I always feel like it's the energy of God or whatever. I feel it as like unconditional love. Like, and I feel like that is not always an experience or a feeling that everyone has had. So I feel like sometimes it can be slightly uncomfortable because it's almost like bigger than our body.
Yeah, our spiritual, like our human vessels, our body, it is so incredible, but it is also important to remember that it is just a vessel, and that helps me a lot I try to like, I pray, you know, let me have life force energy coursing through my veins all day. Let me want to feel alive, because I still struggle with depression and anxiety. So anytime I feel like lit up with source, God, love, like that unconditional love, I'm like visualizing it all through my body and like holding on to it, because I don't feel like that 100% of the time. You know, a lot of the time, like I'm feeling a lot of heavy stuff, like not a lot, but a good amount of the time, like I'm just feeling everyday normal life. So one thing I will say, because this has came up twice, one of my really good childhood friends, December of 2020, I was at my level 2 Reiki class. I had just been attuned in level 2. When I got out of the class and checked my phone, I had a text message from another friend telling me that they had found her and that she had left a note. And I can still feel it and like visualize like me looking down at the phone, and the whole room, it was like this overlay, like a filter feeling. And that's how I think I feel grief too, is like a filter, you know, like how people have filters on their phones and stuff, but this is like a spiritual filter and layers, I guess you could say. So her name was Monique. So back to Monique, I feel her every once in a while. I feel her, like I get messages from her and stuff, but I remember specifically a couple months ago, like I'm driving, I'm all by myself, and she comes to me and I'm just like overwhelmed with love and joy, and I'm so happy, and I'm like, yes, I love you so much. It's okay. And then she starts to fade away and she slips away. And that feeling, like it brings me to tears right now. It is gut wrenching. And I think that's why a lot of people stay in that grief, because of the feeling of having to like go through feeling them slip away, you know, if that makes any sense. Because that's how I feel with my grandma too. Like I'll feel her slip away, but it's a different kind of slip away when I feel her, because she lived a long life. And it's just like different. The grief is different. It's not any better or worse or anything. It's just different.
That's so interesting to think about it like that. Like it's almost like a time capsule or something. Like if you're able to connect in with them, you can connect in with who they were. But I feel like sometimes it's hard to let go and let them experience something different. Like,
Yeah.
but I do think that when we call upon spirits, like, I don't know what you think about reincarnation, but I do think that their energy will always be there, but they might be moving on to something else too.
Yeah.
Which is kind of hard to think of. Like, it's like confusing, but
yeah, I've heard, I'm very open with my beliefs. Like I've heard that a soul can't reincarnate until everybody is gone, that they know that's living. And then I've also heard like that you can be omnipresent already, and like they both make sense to me. I see like I can feel how they both could be true in a sense, but I do also believe and feel that omnipresent unconditional spirit. So of course spirit could be in all the different places, and I definitely believe in past lives. Absolutely.
do you have like any angels like specifically that you feel the most connected to?
Definitely Michael, Archangel Michael. And I had my Akashic records read a couple years ago, and they brought up like a Native American protector man. So I don't know if that was like me in a different life, or if that was just someone that protected me in a different life. I'm still trying to figure all that out and like decode my dreams and whatnot.
Like a
So
guide.
yeah, a guide. That's the word. Definitely a guide.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think there's so many different things that could be possible. I feel like sometimes guides are like us from a past life, or like parallel life. I don't even know how to think about that. It gets so confusing. But it's almost like us coming, even just like our higher self or like future self. I feel like they can come and assist us with things. Same as we could go back and connect with our inner child. But I do feel like, for me at least, my perception is angels are almost like a separate thing. Like an angel could work with us, like Michael or whatever. But it's not necessarily like they're our guide. They're more like that omnipresent thing, like Jesus or Buddha, or like a archetypal energy. Like anyone could develop that relationship, but I do feel like certain ones come in for people. I've seen
Right.
that like with angels, at least.
Right now, who's coming up and they're like, I can't believe you forgot about me. So Kali, the goddess of the universe, and then the green
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 Tara, I
Tara,
have her in my office.
she's coming. Yeah, they just were like, hello. And it's funny because they're like green and red together, kind of. So it's kind of hard for me to just siphon at first because I just felt like energy, and then I got the names, and then I'm like, okay. And I try not to question it too much, because once spirit gives, some clear feelings to you, like you don't need to let your ego talk you out of what you're feeling. If you feel like that Conway Twitty song on the radio was specifically for you or whatever, then it definitely was. And I want people to also know that their loved ones on the other side, at least the way I see it, they're happy when you are like, oh, Grandpa Joe, you loved that song. Like they're like, heck yeah, I did, man, and they're still human. So even if they are like reincarnating and going, since they love us so much, especially grandparents, oh my God, they love their grandkids so much that they're still very much linked into their grandkids.
Yeah, and like I feel like even just working with your own healing, like we're connecting with them so they can kind of feel that, which I think is really cool.
Yeah.
Well, anything else? I'd love to know, like, we mentioned your podcast so people can check that out, and then anything else you want to share? Any big dreams for the podcast? Any plans for the future in terms of what you want to be sharing?
Lots of plans and lots of visions. Ideally, I would like to work with women who are getting out of being incarcerated or domestic violence, or just women who are ready to heal and may not have the means. Like my dream would be obviously to have like a healing oasis for these women where they could like not have to pay anything, and of course they'd be pulling their weight doing other things, but just a safe place for them to get like their feet on the ground and then be reintroduced back into society. Because I think a lot of women are getting sucked into like the generational curse of thinking you have to have, that you're less than because you're not married and having kids by a certain age, or because you've had kids with two different fathers, or because your aunt so and so said you're this. People need to really let go, in my opinion, just trust themselves more and let go of other people's opinions and realize that Jesus is like, he was one of the original. I'm sure there were way more before him, of course, but he really shook stuff up. Like He
People
didn't
did
just
not, everyone hated him. Like when he was
yeah,
alive, like they literally killed him. So
yeah, he was not like he was doing different stuff, just like teachers and spiritual people like me and you who talk about our struggles and still smile and still like don't let anybody take that away from us. I think that's really powerful because um I just think it's interesting the people that like pick on addicts and tell people like, oh, it was a choice, it was just this. And it's like, if you really understood like the things that I tell myself and the way that I beat myself up is way worse than anything that you could ever throw at me. And then on top of that, I've recovered. So just no, like you're basically stepping in your own shit when you talk about a really empowered recovered addict, because why would you, so you're saying that person should be dead? Like I just don't get people's thinking sometimes, but I guess that's the main thing that I just want to like advocate for is not being afraid to speak up for your story and rewrite your story.
and I think that's so important. I feel like people have, no matter what you experience, everyone has some level of like shame around it. And I think even just being open and willing to share snippets of your experience, I think that is healing for so many people to, it's like a weight lifted. And I'm
Yeah.
sure you'll experience that in your own life. But I think that's inspiring for other people. So everyone should check out your podcast, and you can get readings with Ashlyn too.
Yes.
Can people just email you if
Yeah,
they want to get a reading, or do you have a like a website booking thing or?
I do have a booking link, but if you do want to email me, my email is AEM Bliss, BLISS @gmail.com. You can email me and I will send you my link. I'll even do 20% off if you tell me like, hey, I'm from
Oh
Grace's
yeah, that's nice.
podcast. Yeah. And I'm on Facebook as Ashlyn, ASHLYN Martin. And then I am on Instagram and TikTok as Medium Ashlyn.
Amazing. I have one more question. Do your kids know that you're a medium? Do you talk to them about that?
Yes.
Do you think that they have their own like energetic gifts? I mean, everyone does, as we mentioned before, but do you see that for them?
Yes. Like my girls specific, because my little boy, like he's wild. He's a wild card. And my girls are 6 and almost 7 and 13. They're both turning 7 and 13 this year. And they are my biggest role models with just the way that they don't care about what people think. And they're just so unapologetically themselves. My oldest daughter specifically, she will say things like if we're out in public or if we're watching like YouTube with like real reality stars or real people, sometimes she'll be like, Mommy, is her grandma passed away? And I'm like, I have to explain to her kind of what's going on. And she's like, no. And she also lost her aunt Barbara. She lost her aunt right in front of her in 2020. It was a really traumatic thing that happened in the family. And it happened like right in front of her. So she still brings that up a lot. And she'll sometimes say things like, how come you can talk to dead people and I can't?
That
And
is cute.
I'm like, girl, you are. What do you mean? What are you feeling right now? What are you seeing? And she's like, I don't know. I miss Aunt Barbara. And I'm like literally coaching her, telling her like, well, then she must be right there if you miss
Yeah, if you're
her.
thinking about her. Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. My
Well,
kids
thank
are
you.
super.
I really enjoyed having this conversation with you, and I'm excited to share. We'll put all Ashlyn's links in the show notes, and then
Yay.
we will see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.